Thanks for joining us. It's great to be learning together again with you. We've had a wonderful series of Department of Instruction teleconferences these past several years, and something very special and our privilege to take part in. What we'll do is we'll start first with a meditation. And so don't close your eyes yet, because there's an image that we're going to share to get us set into cosmic attunement. And you'll see on the left is the mystic Florence Nightingale, and on the right is the master mystic Yeshua. You see they're both carriers of the lamp, emblematic and symbolic of conveying the light of the God within. We'll tie this image into the work we're going to do in our presentation on the spiritualization of our careers and daily life. Once you've had a good sense of the inspiration of the image, you can let go of the cares of the day and make sure you're sitting comfortably. And I suggest you close your eyes. Take a few deep breaths. It can be neutral breaths, that is, not holding the inhalation or holding the exhalation. And if it's comfortable for you, I suggest you breathe through your nostrils. And that forces us to take deep breaths. It's also a good general practice in life. If you can comfortably and in a healthy way breathe predominantly through your nostrils, you'll find immediately there's a relaxation response, particularly through the vagus nerve. And if you have the ideation on the God within, it becomes a profoundly spiritual practice. After taking a few deep breaths, spine upright, unless you're lying down, but if you're in your seated position, you can have your palms in your lap, face down, your legs at right angles, eyes closed, and just let go of the cares of the day. You can think of the cares being just outside the room you're in or nearby you. They'll be there after this session to rejoin you. But now let's go to the deep, still center in us. Enjoy the wonderful rhythm of the breath, similar to the temple of the body that we learned about 2 weeks ago. We're going to rise up soon into the temple of cosmos, ultimately to the temple of the God associated with the celestial sanctum. First, let's undergo a rite of purification or lustration. Let us say together, may the divine essence of the cosmic infuse my being and cleanse me of all impurities of mind and body, that I may enter the celestial sanctum and attune in pureness and worthiness. So mote it be. Now let us begin to rise up beyond the room where you're at or wherever you're situated. Rosicrucians use the term so mote it mean to be, so be it in truth. Cosmic to symbolize the cosmic mind in action, all the natural and spiritual laws. Keep rising up over the building you're in or the area you're around, up over the city or geographic area. Keep rising up over the province or state where you are. Now rise up over the country you are. See the beautiful view from this high vantage point that suggests the cosmic conscious state. Let's rise up again past the hemisphere that you're in, north or south, whichever is applicable to you. Sense the great rotation of the earth. See the beautiful blue jewel of the earth, the temple of the earth that's our home. And let us turn consciousness out towards the solar system, the great fiery ball of the sun, Venus and Mercury and Jupiter and Saturn. See these beautiful planets. It is our privilege to live amongst and feel their influences on a daily basis, even now. And let's keep rising up faster and faster and sense the great motion of the Milky Way galaxy, which is our home galaxy, and see its great spiraling arms and myriad stars And let's pass out from the Milky Way galaxy and look back at its beautiful spiraling nature, revolving about its great axis. And let's continue to rise at tremendous speed, well beyond the speed of light, which we can do because we're transcending the physical. We're working with the cosmic mind, and see the myriad stars and stellar phenomena, pulsars and binary stars and supernovae, and also black holes and clusters of galaxies and nebulae. Keep rising faster and faster and use great inward strength. Now is not the time to be passive. We'll be passive later. Use great inward force. As we were admonished in earlier times by Grand Master Robert Daniels, use this inward strength that's within you, the infinite resources of the God within, to rise up faster and faster and take in the great stupendous harmony and order of the cosmos, the temple of the cosmos, the temple of God. And as you travel farther and farther and see the stupendous harmony and order of the universe that we call the cosmos from the Greek, sense the great rotating action or the great revolving action on the cosmic axis the universe revolves about, and head towards the center of that great cosmic axis. And as we approach it, visualize that center as your celestial sanctum, the archetypal temple. Maybe an inspiring place in nature. Maybe a church or a Hindu mandir or Buddhist stupa or some other form of temple. Once you reach the center, enter into your temple and fill in the sights and the sounds. Make it real, just as we do in a visualization. Since there are other spiritual seekers and Rosicrucian students there of like mind, maybe participating in a Rosicrucian convocation with the Chief Executive Officer of Order of the Imperator, Grand Masters there. Visualize it as you wish, but you may wish to take a seat. You may wish to sense incense and see the sights of beautiful symbolism and stained glass windows. Make it real, make it vibrant, make it inspiring, make it an exhilarating place to be. Once you've filled in your visualization, dwell there for a time in peace profound. If you find the mind wandering, just come back lovingly and gently to your place in the celestial sanctum, the center of the universe, the center of the cosmic mind, the center of your being. Now, there's various reasons to rise to the heights of the celestial sanctum. One is, as we're doing now, for general enlightenment and experience of peace profound or profound peace. Another closely related is that you may wish to ask of the God within, the Master within, that deepest part of your nature that's fully connected with the universal consciousness, a question. If you wish to do so, you can do so now. But ensure that the question is clear and simple, well-defined, and has an emotional intensity, and not something that you can readily answer by any other means using the faculties of your self-consciousness. Maybe an important life question, a pressing decision. Be that as it may, if you wish to visualize the question now in your screen of your consciousness, you may want to see it as letters, spelling out the words, or in fiery letters to impress on the screen of your consciousness. But do so now. And when you're ready, release the question into the depths of your subconscious, relating to the cosmic, and dwell again in peace profound, ready for the answer to come forth, just like you're in a great theater and the curtains are about to rise and the actors come out, the way that your answer may come out. Now or at a later time when it's best for you. You may have found the answer has come forward or an important clue, or it may come later in the day, being clothed in the impression of something you see or something you hear. But be confident the cosmic law fulfills. Any sincere question in good conscience that cannot be readily answered by other means will come forward as needed. Before we descend from the heights of the celestial sanctum, let us undertake further spiritual operations of the work and worship of the Rosicrucian Order AMORC. Let us join in the work of the Silent Council in conjunction with the Council of Solace that sends metaphysical aid to all those in need. Let us radiate now love and well-being to all those who have petitioned our Grand Lodge, the Rosicrucian Order, or your Grand Lodge, and your affiliate body for aid and healing assistance. Also radiate out to all those frontline workers in the health profession and all those that know their need, and also all sentient beings throughout the cosmos. Let us radiate love and well-being now. Now we'll conclude this formal period of the work of the Silent Council in conjunction with the Council of Solace by saying, if it pleases the cosmic, it is done, with the assurance that the love and well-being will continue to radiate. Now let us continue to dwell for a while longer, profound peace, the heights of the celestial sanctum. Now let us express our gratitude for this opportunity to be of service and have the privilege of attuning with the cosmic, which is our birthright. And let us express gratitude to all those that have mentored us, that have taught us, that have inspired us, and those who have loved us. And applying the law of gratitude, find that we're further attuned with the cosmic. Now let us begin our descent from the heights of the celestial sanctum down past superclusters of galaxies, the nebulae, and individual galaxies and myriad stars, moving at great speed, ultimately reaching to the great spiraling galaxy, the Milky Way. We'll go back in the great arm that is our home. And come to the solar system, past the fiery ball of the sun. Return back to the beautiful blue jewel of the earth. There in the building, I should say the hemisphere that we're at, and then the country, state or province, city or town or specific geographic location, and the building, and then the room, in the chair, or however we're situated in the room. And we can say together, may the God of my heart sanctify this attunement of self, the celestial sanctum, so mote it be. And when you're ready, you can wish to open your eyes and stretch a little, refreshed, regenerated, and spiritualized. Thank you. Great. So on the topic of our day, the spiritualization of our careers and daily life, you've noted in the advertisement I took as a starting point, profound work by a past Grand Master of the Rosicrucian order. He oversaw the order in Great Britain, Raymond Andrea. And in that book, The Technique of the Disciple, he declares that whatever we have and prize dearly can be recreated, clarified, and oriented in spiritual vision and become a thing of sheer beauty in the light of the soul. Indeed, as we advance in our maturity as a human being, we could also say on the equivalent on the spiritual path, and increase in our understanding of the unified consciousness, our sense of unity. There's an increasing desire to make our lives much more meaningful, an increased expression of that unity in one's highest ideals, and a greater avenue of service to others. The law of service is always centrally stressed. You know, when I talk about spiritualization, it's a term you're not so familiar with, I'm using it in the sense of transfiguration, in terms of being a radiant living example of natural and spiritual laws, of great sense of love and well-being and compassion to others, being fully human, fully matured, or on the way. Another way to look at it is as if you're inclined to alchemy, particularly transcendental alchemy. You can think of transmutation. Another way from a mystical perspective, you remember I talked earlier in a session about stages of mystical development and stage of purification, or stages of purification. You can think of spiritualization as purification in terms of following our conscious more, changing the habits in our subconscious so that they're more life-affirming ones. Sometimes we have habits or ways of life that served us when we were children or earlier in our adult life. We're no longer doing so, that need to be changed. And that's part of the purification process. Now, an important law in this spiritualized process is the law of cosmic attunement. We applied that in our meditation. Part of the reason I took a little extra time in our meditation today before the presentation is to have that full direct experience, because the Rosicrucian order is very practical. And it's very important. Just like one could read a book on the cello and read it very intensively over a weekend and get tremendous amount of detail about how to play the cello. But that doesn't mean that one could pick up a cello and play it. In fact, you probably no more do that and play beautiful cello music unless you had some extensive musical background, and you could physically jump to the moon. So this is something where practical experience is very important. Another important law that we apply is the law of love, and it's something that must be central to everything that we do. You'll see that it is the central law, and it's the key to spiritualization. Now, in terms of service, you can think of it as ultimately fulfilling one's purpose and mission in life. And in doing so, we most efficiently and meaningfully work towards the uplift and increased well-being of humanity and all life. Now, very important to spiritualization or life, and we were speaking a little bit about that before we started today, is health. And by health, of course, we mean to be whole. And similar to what the Grand Master mentioned last week on developing ease in our level, in our being, that ease is related to the opposite of dis-ease, to have that sense of ease and well-being. We also stress good character in the order, following of the virtues and building up character, and mental power and freedom of existence. These things together, health, good character, mental power, and freedom of existence, they constitute what is true wealth. And health is the first thing that we have to build up if we're seeking abundance in living, which is an aspect of spiritualization of our lives. Another important law is the law of compensation. We must give to receive. And one finds the right balance. As we study and learn, it's important for us to give back to others. We must at all times keep receptive to our cosmic impressions. That's something where the outer self needs to work as a companion to that cosmic mind, and ultimately realize that we're one with it. All these different forms of consciousness I talked about during the cosmic consciousness presentation, they're all different expressions of cosmic consciousness. Self-consciousness that's associated with our brain, it's ultimately a form of cosmic consciousness that the brain can handle. Part of all this spiritualization, though, is that we've got to make sure that we're not held back by our prejudices. There may be ones that were raised with, or were suggested to us subtly through various influences. Also, a very important part of the mystical life and maturing is we avoid resisting lessons. We've got to make sure we're not resisting lessons. And one way we know we've resisted lessons in a big way is that if we have a crisis in our life, because crises in our life arise when we've continually resisted a lesson. One thing, though, that the outer self can be try to squirm out of not having important lessons or think that it's in charge, whereas the God within is that when we do learn these lessons, particularly ones we've been avoiding, we'll find that we're enriched, we're ennobled. It's a little bit like if some of you used to in affiliate bodies, the order where a gong is used. If you can think of that gong having a bunch of jackets on or a bunch of clothing on it, and the guardian trying to sound it, the sound would be greatly dampened. That's why when we have a lot of inharmonious lessons in our laws in our subconscious, that's the effect and the power of that gong is like the radiating of love and well-being inside of us. As those more harmonious lessons are placed in the subconscious or changed, as laws in the subconscious, the gonging is stronger, more rich. The light of God can radiate out much greater from us. We're more truly human or fully human. That's why an important part of the mystical path is self-analysis. And when we're doing our work and our jobs, including when there's paid employment involved, we must have very strongly the spirit of service, and that we're giving back more than a salary interest. Later, when we start a discussion, Karen's going to paste in some resources, but with the advertisement or notice for this presentation, I'll mention that there's going to be some resources to some of the things I've been referring to. They'll come a little later in the presentation. You'll see them in the chat. Now, I want to mention briefly, because there's a lot in this topic, but I want to sort of make certain highlights for you and give you some time for our discussion, is that depending on the type of career you take up, there's certain important understandings. Traditionally, when we talk about the intellect, it was not the reason. The deeper spiritual understanding of the intellect is the property of mind or the capacity of mind that draws us to the divine. Reason, on the contradistinction, in some ways parallels it, but it's actually things of the world, things of the self-consciousness. So I'll mention a few things that are intellectual in nature, but if you can make them live realities in your life, they're important keys that are very transformative, that spiritualize our life. For example, if you're in a career that's in mathematics or statistics or very scientifically and quantitatively orientated, one may mention, well, how can I spiritualize that? Well, one important key is the Pythagorean tradition. The number is the key to all things, both quantitatively, but also qualitatively through symbolic means. Because in the first 10 whole numbers, 1 to 10, is the entire embodiment of traditional philosophy. It's striking in this regard when the renowned physicist Werner Heisenberg was a young man. He studied Plato's Timaeus, and you know that that's this inspired Pythagorean text that talks about the creation of the universe by the demiurge as a mathematical act. That made a very deep impression and inspired him very much as a young man, that he credited to part of his inspiration in the major development of the quantum mechanics. And you can see in the modern physics, moving away from the Newtonian physics, there was increased mathematization and abstraction. Part of that was his inspired experience of the Plato's Timaeus and the Pythagorean tradition. One of my applied math professors, who was an expert in quantum mechanics, I once asked him, what do you think is truly there in existence? And he answered, symmetries. The Pythagoreans would have loved that, and that in a way is a spiritualization. So bear that in mind. I find it very helpful for me as a mathematician and a statistician to keep these in mind. I know some of you are very involved in psychology, and I've met various Rosicrucian students who are psychiatrists, and there was a Dr. Rawson who wrote some Rosicrucian Digest, who's earlier years, who was psychiatrist. It's truly wonderful when a psychiatrist or psychologist is very spiritually orientated, because they have that deep understanding of psychology that then links them with the cosmic understanding. Indeed, an important way to spiritualize our lives is to be very attentive to etymology, or the origins of words, because psychology and psychiatry have in it the Greek word psyche, that alludes to soul, the study of the soul. Another thing that, if you're a health professional, one thing that you can very much keep in mind, along with the psychologists and psychiatrists, we have various inspiring mystics who are healers, such as the master Yeshua that we showed in the image. That was a painting by the Pre-Raphaelite painter Holman Hunt, or Paracelsus, a very inspired doctor. We're finding gradually how much we owe to him in terms of our medical knowledge. And also people like Florence Nightingale that you saw a picture of, and that's part of the reason I showed at the very beginning before we entered into our meditation. She was a mystic. That is often not generally known, but it's becoming much more apparent. For example, on the day that she was called to go to the Crimea and form a group of nurses to form hospital in Crimea, we know that she was reading a very inspired mystical text by Thomas à Kempis called The Imitation of Christ, because we have her notations in that book, and by those notations we know she's had the mystical experiences. In fact, she used those to be brave when she was amidst thousands of young persons that were soldiers who had been on the point of transition in the Great Initiation or needing healing, but also inspired her to continue with great health reforms, such as making sure that patients had good food, had good air to breathe, had healthy conditions to live in. In fact, when she was on the finishing up girlhood, on the becoming to early womanhood, she had a deep mystical experience that she knew since she was guided to God's work, that she fulfilled. So this is a way that our life is spiritualized. And then we have these inspiring healers. If you're very inclined towards music, one of the keys is the 4 traditional senses of music. Today when we think of music, we think of instrumental music or music of the voice. And then sometimes we may make reference to something very musical in the way that the wind was blowing or the stream is making sounds, thinking that's figurative music. But traditionally, to mystics, there were 4 musics that one was the music of the body, which is associated with health, the harmonious relationships, all the dynamic rhythms in the body. Traditionally associated with the 4 humors, but we can see it now: the autonomic nervous system, the pulse, the flow of the blood, and the nervous system, and many other systems in our body. They have a harmonious order and action and rhythm. That's a form of music, and I'm not speaking symbolically. That literally was a music. So you had to know the context of this person who was speaking, know which music. Then there was the music that we speak of today, of the instrumental and voice music. There was also then the music of the world, which was the gurgling of the creek or the river, the beautiful sounds of the evergreens or the weeping willows, the wind goes through it. Or as we made our ascent in the cosmic, the beautiful harmony and order of the revolving of the heavenly bodies associated with the music of the spheres. Then there was also what was called the music of God, the divine music. All these forms of music were to drop in. That's why when you have a very inspiring piece of music that you're listening today that's instrumental and voice, you'll often have a deep sense of elation or well-being that's drawing you to the divine music. The divine music was also to inspire the artist to create the instrumental music. These are things that can transform one's understanding and spiritualize music. If your inclinations to other art forms, one thing that's very helpful is to think of the 4 traditional senses by which sacred texts were interpreted. These are ones that Dante, for example, talks about and that actually Shakespeare applied in his dramas. Often it takes a lifetime to finally realize that Shakespearean dramas, especially if you view them as a whole, they're a passage of purification. They're going on in those stories. And in some ways, it's a psychodrama that's going on within us. And that those dramas are written from the cosmic state. We talked about the cosmic conscious state earlier. They're written from that state. You see the full overview of humanity, the various different characteristics that one grasps in the cosmic conscious state with ease. Shakespeare is portraying that before us. That's why they have such a deep impression from us, even from childhood. But those four traditional senses were first the literal, the moral or the tropological, and then there was also the allegorical and the anagogical, or the mystical. And I'll give you a reference on that, but just to give you an example. For example, we read in the Bible about Jerusalem. Literally, it was the geographic city, and historically it conjured up a wealth of events of past memory. An account that had taken place and culminated in this holy city of David, Solomon, and the mission of the Master Yeshua. Allegorically, Jerusalem signified the church, or the collective body of spiritual aspirants and initiates. Morally, it represented the virtuous or faithful soul. On the mystical level, it was the heavenly city, the abode of the spiritual elect, and the experience of cosmic consciousness. There's other levels. In fact, there's a scientific level in the Bible. For example, it may intrigue you that scientifically and cosmologically, the heavenly Jerusalem is a model of the cosmos, or a cosmogram, with the 12 zodiacal gates in the 4 directions. Now, these successive levels leading to the mystical sense require increasing maturity and responsibility and awareness to be able to penetrate. And they require a great deal of steadfastness. One has to be relentless. I've mentioned some texts that are related to the Western tradition, but these go on in the Eastern tradition and the tradition also interpreting the Kabbalah. But in the writing, in the arts, if these levels are kept in mind, they'll transform our living. They'll spiritualize when we work in the arts. This presentation today, for example, is operating on those 4 levels as well. For those of you who are very inclined towards business, there's a lot of inspiring examples of mystics who are business persons. For example, there's Alice and Albert Hubbard, the renowned Roycrofters, who assisted Dr. H. Spencer Lewis with the revival of the outer expression of our order for this cycle. They were great proponents of the arts and crafts movement. And you ever have a chance to go to East Aurora, near Buffalo, or Buffalo, New York, or Niagara Falls, it's a wonderful experience of how business can be spiritualized. And I think you'll have chills going up your spine, because it's so mystical and Rosicrucian in the way that the place has been set up and works. There's also persons like Ingrid Young talked about last time, Dr. H. Spencer Lewis. He was a business person, wide-ranging talents that he then used and applied in helping with the promotion of the Rosicrucian order. There's often stories about business persons that are very profound and memorable. You may not think of them such as initiatory dramas, but they are. One, for example, is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, where Ebenezer Scrooge, someone who is extremely capable in business, but he was not spiritualizing his approach to it. So he got visited by 3 spiritual beings on Christmas Eve and in the early hours of Christmas. It turned out he didn't need to change his job to spiritualize it. He just needed to be much more thoughtful of the well-being of others. As his business partner in a spiritual form came to tell him, Jacob Marley said to him the effect that humankind was our business. And he showed him the great chains that he developed through his karmic debt that Scrooge would have to undo by helping with the healing of Timmy in and helping with various others that he had the means to. And he says, in it, that I don't deserve this to be this happy. It was a bit like he removed a lot of those encumberments from his subconscious, and the gong now was ringing beautifully and profoundly. And he said to his niece, his nephew's partner. Can you forgive a pig-headed fool all these years who had no eyes to see and no ears to hear? This is truly what we're called to in spiritualization. Now, there's many other ways that we can think about spiritualizing in our careers and our lives. And one really good source for that is the Rosicrucian utopia. You don't think of it quite in that way before. There's going to be a reference to it. You can, I think others, I think you're mainly familiar with it, but we'll give a link to it shortly. But in it, it talks about things about economics and other effect subjects and careers, and how to spiritualize them for the well-being of humanity and work in harmony with the cosmic. No matter whether we're in paid employment or not, or whatever our situation is, one of the ways that we can always spiritualize our lives is through our contact with people. And we do that by honoring the God within each person. And that will spiritualize our living and help spiritualize theirs as well. We always have the, excuse me. We always have the opportunity to assist others and encourage them in our daily activities and work. There may be something that we can say, a compliment that we can genuinely give, a sympathetic and compassionate ear, and that'll help strengthen others and mature us as well. There's different forms of listening. We talked about those four senses in terms of music, and 2 weeks ago in the sense of the temple, the sense of interpretation of sacred writings. There's also these four senses in listening. The deepest form of listening can be very healing, or making whole of another. This is where we temporarily let go of our needs and the idea to give advice or to say something about our experience, but go with the deeper feeling, the deeper heartfelt feeling of our speaker, and follow that, and they'll recognize, if they're inclined, that we're ready and willing to listen. It's something there that often we think, well, let's jump in and give some advice. Often we can sort of wait on that, because often when we really carefully listen to someone, what that'll help to do is, as we attune with the cosmic, they'll attune with the cosmic, like two tuning forks that are the same pitch as one is sounded. That the wisdom will come out from within them, just like we do with the metaphysical healing. And then they'll truly own those insights and use them to change themselves and the laws in the subconscious, because they already have the deep wisdom within themselves. In this regard, a very inspiring figure is Fred Rogers. There's been increased interest with him in a movie. But he was actually a Presbyterian minister. He was deeply spiritually inclined. He started his days always around 5 in the morning with reflection and prayer and going swimming. But he had a deep sense of calling. His pastoral care was implicitly, did not hit anyone over the head with it, but it was explicitly, was to minister through people and children in pastoral care through children television, which he did in a new and creative way that was very respectful, very healing, and wonder-inspired message, not only for children, but for their parents. Another spiritual way to spiritualize our life is to think of ourselves as a leader. Now, to the other self, that can often seem rather daunting, because we think, wow, I'm not a leader. But we can always be a leader in the sense of setting a good example. And we can always help leaders and being a good worker with them. Also, when we come more into the cosmic state, or listen to or hearken to the words of the master within, we'll be strengthened to be more of a leader in our community, in our settings. It's striking when I mention about these various things. Sometimes people have highly spiritualized their lives and they don't realize it. In fact, they may have even fulfilled their mission in their life. You can think of a mission in the sense of fulfilling the true purpose, or the main purpose in one's life, and the main reason one incarnated for. I remember one of my architecture professors being taken aback when there was a retirement party for him. In the architecture building, which had 3 floors. They'd never seen anything like it. All 3 floors were packed with his students coming back after decades from far and wide. They had been so inspired by him. You know, he said to me that in a way I feel like Mr. Holland's Opus. Remember that 1995 movie with Glenn Holland, the teacher, who was a music teacher, always wanted to write his opus, and he was starring Richard DeFries. But sometimes we've accomplished our great work through those who we've guided and inspired in our lives. For that architecture professor, he was also an architect, and one of his magnum opuses was a Ukrainian Catholic church that's on the very west side of Brampton in the Greater Toronto area. I had the privilege and delight of taking Stephen Armstrong, one of the staff members of our order there, and Stephen was greatly inspired by that building, as I was, because it was a true temple on earth, inspired by the divine archetype through my architecture professor. And Stephen said that to me as he was going. He said, "I'll remember this for the rest of my life. That was so wonderful and beautiful." And so sometimes in our work we know, but sometimes we don't know. By things we've said or done, we inspire people from then on, and then they tell others to help inspire them, just like we mentioned Albert Hubbard and Alice Hubbard today, for example. I'm going to say a few concluding things now. Then we'll have some time for discussion. You know, I mentioned various laws for us to be attentive. The practice of the Rosicrucian teachings, those things will spiritualize us. We may not even have that in mind, but they'll do that. You know, just as I mentioned, breathing through the nostrils and the relaxation practice, you can do that throughout your day with the idea of God on your mind. You're meditating all the time. That's a wonderful spiritualization practice, a deep sense of calm that helps guide us in wisdom. One thing that is spiritual, very spiritual about visualization practice, and we discussed in our order, is that we become a co-creator with God. You know, one of the inspired Rosicrucians that worked with Dr. H. Spencer Lewis, and his work in business, and he was a leader in business in the early 20th century, this particular Rosicrucian, he said he always made the cosmic a partner in everything he did. That's one way to think of spiritualizing our lives in business. You know, creativity. Often we think of that, well, that's for someone who's very creative in the arts, but every day we apply creativity in terms of how we do things with our home, with our friends, how we make a meal. That is truly a God-given quality that helps spiritualize us and when we be creative. One of the ways to spiritualize life is always to be making sure we're doing meditation readily and heeding our intuitive impressions, and very important, acting on them. Yes. And we talked earlier about love being the greatest law of the universe. And that's always something to keep forefront of our mind, to be loving, just as we radiate love and well-being in our meditation today, to keep that as what some call the art of radiation of love and well-being as we ideate on God. That's always been. That in itself will transmute us, transform us, spiritualize us. You know, as we mature and evolve, as Rosicrucian would say, unfold the petals of the rose that's at our heart. Our understanding becomes more expansive, timeless, and universal. Our way of life becomes more wholesome, life-affirming, and healthy in the manner full intended for humanity's mission and purpose on earth. In this manner, the petals of the rose unfold. We learn the lessons of life and are living radiant embodiments of them in the experience of the unified consciousness and mystical union with God. In this manner, our careers and daily lives are spiritualized, become highly meaningful, become greater expressions of unity and the God within, and are of the greatest service to others. Thank you, everyone.